If you can answer yes to all 10 of these questions, then you might be ready to retire. Do you wake up on yet another Monday morning and wonder, when will I retire? Yes, working another year might boost your financial security, but is it really worth trading more and more and more years of your life for a few more paychecks? I want to give you 10 questions to help you decide if you're really ready to retire. And I'll also include a bonus, one of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to their retirement. If you're new here, welcome to Modern Money Talk, where I take 15 years working in finance to help you make smarter money decisions. First up, are you debt-free? And just so we're clear, yes, I am including if you have a mortgage in this debt bucket here. And my rationale is very simple. Your housing costs are likely to be one of the biggest outgoings every single month. So eliminating debt as well as any other high interest debt is a key first step to deciding if you're ready to retire. Because the average monthly mortgage payment on a house in the UK is £1,428 according to the latest figures. So that is £1,428 that you don't have to come up with every single month. But if we dig into this a bit more, the average UK homeowner spends approximately 36% of their monthly take-home pay on mortgage payments. This is only likely to increase as house prices in the UK continue to go up and up and up. But here's the thing, if you could increase your take-home pay by just over a third every single month by cutting out your mortgage basically, that just gives you so much more breathing room to be able to do what you want. Because this is the truth, in retirement your income is about to take a hit. And then that means your ability to service any outstanding debt is diminished. But it also means that your ability to raise new debt is also diminished. So the easiest thing is to just have no debt when you go into retirement. Next up, do you know what state pension you'll qualify for? Now, I must say this is very unknown, but not everyone will qualify for this full state pension. As always, a shout out to Martin Lewis for shining a light on this one, but check this out. The full new state pension is currently £230.25p a week. However, how much you receive depends on how many qualifying full national insurance years you have. You need at least 10 qualifying national insurance years to get some state pension. After that, the more years, the bigger your state pension payout. And to get the full state pension, you need 35-ish qualifying national insurance years. So here's the thing. If you spent some time out of work to raise kids, look after elderly parents, maternity leave, paternity leave, took a sabbatical, whatever, then that might mean that you're ineligible for the full state pension. But luckily, and goodness me, I don't get to say this too often, the government makes it pretty easy to check how much you'll qualify for. I'll put a link in the description, but do make sure you check. Because frankly, I think people underestimate the value that the state pension will play in their retirement, because it can be a rock-solid source of income. Your retirement plans can be absolutely nuked from orbit if you're planning on relying on the state pension in any way, but you end up not getting it or not getting as much as you thought. Now, we should also mention you can buy back some years by effectively filling in the missing years, but it might not always be worth it. So make sure you read this article here from Money Saving Expert. Link will also be in the description. Next up, do you have other stable sources of income you can rely on? So having just talked about state pension, reliable sources of income is an obvious next place to move on to. And we talked about how you shouldn't necessarily assume you're going to get the full state pension, but it would also be frankly remiss of me not to mention one very important thing, that you need to have one or more other stable income streams that you can rely on. Now, it's underrated, but one of the nice things about having a permanent job is that you know exactly what you'll get paid and when you'll get paid it. And I must say, there is a great deal of satisfaction and comfort that you can take from that. Very spiritually and financially nourishing. But after you walk out that door for the last time and you walk into your new and retired life, you will, in all likelihood, lose some of that certainty. So you should spend some time looking into your pensions, what you've accumulated, and help decide what your next step should be. Do you have other forms of income which are going to be reasonably stable, which you can rely on to help bridge that gap? Now, you can also decide to defer the state pension. This is a little known secret about the state pension, is that delaying when you start taking your payments could mean you get a higher amount when you do decide to claim it. So that means if you live for a long time, it could net you thousands and thousands of pounds. Now, it might be the case that you have a nest egg that you can draw from, an annuity policy, a final salary, income from rental properties, whatever it might be. Just make sure you've got at least one consistent and reliable income source that's not going to have wild income swings. But you must wait for the last point before you really decide what to do here. Have you done your inheritance tax planning? Now, those of you that follow this sort of thing closely will notice that there have been some pretty big changes to inheritance tax since Labour came into power. And I'm not talking about the farming stuff. That's another topic for another video for another day. The conventional wisdom was that if you had a pension and an ISA, it made sense to use your ISA first, because historically your pension wasn't included in the value of your estate. So you could live off your ISA, let your pension carry on growing in your retirement, and then leave it to your children or grandchildren without the headache of an inheritance tax bill. But now that is all going to change. From April 2027, defined contribution pensions will be included in your estate's value when calculating inheritance tax, potentially subjecting them to a standard 40% inheritance tax rate. But before you start panicking, there are options available to you, like watching this video that we did just here, where we discuss some of the key ways that you can manage your inheritance tax bill. But if you have concerns about leaving your children or grandchildren with a potential bill, you can just get a life insurance policy for the approximate amount that you think your inheritance tax bill is going to be. Now, as is often the case when it comes to personal finance, the earlier you can get this cover, the better the price you'll pay on it. Then once you depart this world, your beneficiaries can make a claim on the policy to clear any inheritance tax bill. But we should also mention, this is something that is very, very worth discussing with a professional. Your individual circumstances are exactly that, individual. And making sure that this is something that you have either sought advice on or have done a good amount of research on is absolutely key. Does your budget match how you want to spend your retirement? So I know, this one is very obvious, but how you plan to spend your time and your retirement is likely going to be very different from your spending during your working life. Otherwise, frankly, why bother retiring? So you should really make sure that how you're going to spend your time and your money matches your new budget. But I want to clarify this. I think that you're likely going to make some considerable monthly savings. The cost of not commuting into work, maybe not running 2 cars, all of those things are going to change how much money you spend. But having said that, you might find that you spend money in chunks more frequently, like going on holidays more often and that sort of thing. So you should really understand how much your retirement is going to cost, what you want your retirement to look like, and putting together a budget that really matches that. Once you have your expenses, you can start to estimate what your post-retirement income is going to look like, which we've touched on a little bit at the beginning of the video. Now, I know these conversations can be about as welcome as a turd in a hot tub, but this is a fundamental part of the whole retirement conversation. And frankly, without being boring again, how are you going to draw on your pension in the most tax-efficient way? Are you invested as tax-efficiently as possible? So we've already mentioned inheritance tax planning, which is, frankly, in the topic of personal finance, one of the least fun things to discuss, both on this channel and with your loved ones, but unfortunately it is a necessary evil, I'm afraid. But aside from inheritance tax, there are other things you should be looking at. One is taking advantage of employer matching just before retirement. And that's because ideally by this time you've saved enough throughout your working life to build a pension pot which can sustain you through retirement. But if you haven't, and frankly no judgment here if you hadn't, or if you think you want a little bit extra stuffed under the mattress so you can enjoy your retirement a bit more, you might want to use this opportunity to make some larger contributions to your pension. And frankly, that's because in all probability, this will be when maybe your kids are no longer financially dependent on you, maybe the mortgage has been paid off, and hopefully your salary will never have been higher. This in theory means that it might be a fantastic time to start making big lump sum contributions to your pension. Now, the current pension limit is £60,000 or 100% of your salary, but you do have the benefit of being able to go back for the last 3 years and use any unused balances. It can help you make up for lost time, and if you're not maximising your employer contributions, now is frankly an essential time to do it. And this can also include making sure that you have as much money as you reasonably can have in your ISAs, and if you've got children or grandchildren, you can also look at junior ISAs and junior SIPs. Make sure you're making use of them for your children and your grandchildren. They're super tax efficient, and as is definitely the case with the junior SIP, they can be a really, really effective way to leave money and to help secure your children's financial future for decades to come. Are you invested to match your retirement goals? Now, typical thought is that when you're younger, you want to invest in higher risk asset classes when you're younger, because you have time to ride the wave up and for the growth to compound into larger gains over time. And you also have time on your side to ride out any short-term volatility. But that you should also gradually de-risk the closer you get to retirement. This means maybe ditching individual stocks in favour of indexes, maybe gradually moving away from equities towards bonds and cash, and so on and so on. And frankly, we could do a whole video about this, but again, that's another topic for another day. But ultimately, there are really just 2 questions that you'll need to answer here. How much will you be able to access, and when will you be able to access it? So at the moment, most of this will be driven by your age. Typically, you can't access a pension until you're 55, but that is increasing. From April 2028, you will need to be 57 to access your pension, not 55. So make sure that you can understand both of these questions. There's no point, frankly, quitting in an absolute blaze of glory only to find out you can't access your pension for another 2 years. So make sure your investment vehicles and your investment strategies match your retirement goals. Also, just another thought whilst we're here is that you may also want to consider a phased retirement, maybe gradually reducing your hours until you're finally ready to pull the plug and retire completely. Does your living situation reflect how you want to retire? Now, I must say, regular viewers of the channel will know that I have recently moved house and that there are few things on God's green earth that I loathe more than the unnecessarily costly and complicated process of moving house in the UK. In fact, here's something that I was looking at. How long does it take to move house in the UK compared to other countries? And there we are, right at the top of the leaderboard, a leaderboard that, frankly, you don't want to be at the top of, but again, another topic for another day. But all this is relevant to this point. What you really want to do is make sure that where you live, the size of your house, the size of your garden, and so on, matches what you want to do in retirement. If you've had a few kids, they've now left home and they've got their own places, is downsizing something you might want to consider doing to help cut your overheads? Do you want to live by the beach when there isn't poop in it? Would you trade a smaller house for a bigger garden because you want to grow your own veg? Whatever it is you want to do. And anyway, my point on this is very simple. Because the house moving process in the UK can throw up so many costs and be so unbelievably complicated, my view is that this is something you should already have at least considered, if not already done, by the time you get to retirement. And we'll discuss this more in the next point as well. Does your retirement not rely on an unknown value in the future? Now, frankly, I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. It is a very, very high-risk strategy to have your retirement plans hinge on some unknown and as yet unrealised gain in the future. If you've lived a champagne lifestyle on a lemonade wage and you're just counting down the days until Great Aunt Bessie pops her clogs and leaves you with a Rembrandt she had hanging on the wall or the chateau in the south of France to bail you out, then that is a high-risk strategy. So if some or all of your retirement heavily relies on some cash or asset windfall in the future, then you might want to reconsider your options. Maybe she left it to a cat sanctuary or, in her last will and testament, she changed it at the last moment. So don't be too reliant on the unknown. Moving house in the UK is horrendously expensive, and with a completely broken housing market and housing system, you should not rely on some future unknown cash lump sum in order to fund your retirement. Maybe you're hoping that when you downsize, you'll be able to release the equity from your house and use that to fund your retirement. That is still quite a high-risk strategy, and it might be more of a risk than you'd be willing to take. And frankly, it's why I think that moving before you retire can be so worthwhile. It means you know exactly how much money you're working with when you do come to retire. Have you consulted a professional? Listen, at the end of the day, this is one of those things where consulting with a professional can be the best option. Someone who has experience in managing retirements, who is well versed in all the necessary and potential tax implications, someone who can give you proper advice, and most importantly of all, advice that is tailored to you and your specific circumstances. What type of life you want to live, who you want to live with, who you want to leave your money to, how much, and so on and so on. This is one of those instances where getting professional guidance can just be money well spent. Now, we mentioned at the start of the video that people make a big mistake when it comes to their retirement, and it's that they only think about the money. No, don't get me wrong. I know that this is a personal finance YouTube channel, but we are firmly in the camp that money might make the world go round, but that your life shouldn't revolve around money. I even did a video about the biggest money mistakes that I made and why I'll never regret them, like turning down a better paying job that was making me miserable to spend more time with my young family. Look, here's the bottom line. When you decide to retire is a deeply personal decision, and your finances will undoubtedly play a massive role in that decision, or frankly, at least they should do. But at the same time, there are some follow-up questions that you should really ask yourself. Do you know what you want to do with your retirement? Having something that you're going to commit your time, resources, and energy to in place of work is a really important first step. Have you achieved everything you want to achieve from your job? If you have a satisfying and fulfilling job and there are other things you want to achieve, then maybe stick at it for a bit longer or go part-time to gradually phase it out. Do you have a strong support system for when you retire? Listen, it's a big life change which shouldn't be underestimated, so having people around you who have either done it themselves or are planning to do it soon can really help you navigate these big life changes. We have this video just here about how you can pay less tax, this video just here on how to pay less tax on your savings, and this video just here about how you can pay less inheritance tax legally. You've been watching Modern Money Talk. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe.